The radar screen flickered with an impossible signature. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Viper Rodriguez squinted at the green blip that shouldn't exist, moving at speeds that defied physics over the restricted airspace of Naval Air Station Oceana. The contact appeared for 3 seconds, vanished for 7, then reappeared 2 miles away in a pattern that made his combat-hardened mind race with questions he couldn't answer. Control, Ghost 7-1, confirm bogey at bearing 270, Angels 15, Rodriguez transmitted, his voice carrying the controlled tension of a pilot who'd seen combat over 3 theaters but never anything like this. The response crackled through static. Ghost 7-1, negative contact on scope. Advise you're flying solo tonight. But Rodriguez knew what he'd seen. The signature moved like liquid mercury across his HUD, executing maneuvers that would liquefy any human pilot at those G-forces. He'd been flying FA-18 Super Hornets for 12 years, had logged over 2,000 combat hours, and thought he understood the boundaries of what was possible in the sky. Tonight, those boundaries were being rewritten. 3 miles below, Captain Esperanza, Echo, Valdez-Chen sat in the cockpit of what appeared to be a modified aircraft that existed in no official registry. Her fingers danced across controls that pulsed with technology decades ahead of anything the Navy had publicly acknowledged. The daughter of a Guatemalan immigrant mother and Taiwanese aerospace engineer father, she'd learned to fly before she could legally drive, earned her wings at 22, and had been officially declared killed in action over Syria 18 months ago. The billionaire part was recent. The technology surrounding her was not. Her aircraft, designation unknown to anyone outside of a classified project, buried so deep that even Pentagon officials forgot it existed, responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. Composite materials that bent light around its airframe, engines that left no heat signature, and avionics that made the most advanced fighter jets look like crop dusters from the 1940s. Rodriguez couldn't know that Echo had been watching his squadron for 3 hours, evaluating their formation, flying, reaction times, and communication protocols. He couldn't know that she'd been testing not just her aircraft's capabilities, but her own readiness to emerge from the shadows, where she'd spent the last year and a half perfecting something that would change aerial warfare forever. What Rodriguez did know was that someone, or something, was playing games with physics above his head, and his orders were to investigate and report. He pulled back on his stick, engaging afterburners, climbing toward a confrontation with technology that officially didn't exist, piloted by a woman the Navy had already buried with full honors. The real story was just beginning. Echo watched Rodriguez's Super Hornet climb toward her position, its exhaust plume bright against the darkness. She could have disappeared instantly, vanished into the night like a ghost that existed only in radar glitches and pilot reports that would be dismissed as equipment malfunction. Instead, she made a decision that would ripple through the Pentagon, the defense industry, and the lives of everyone who thought they understood the limits of human achievement. She decided to let him see her. The revelation began with a simple radio transmission on an encrypted frequency that Rodriguez shouldn't have been able to receive. Ghost 7-1, this is Echo Actual. Permission to join your flight. Rodriguez's blood ran cold. Echo Actual had been Esperanza Valdez-Chen's call sign. He'd attended her memorial service. He'd watched her flag-draped coffin disappear into Arlington National Cemetery. But the voice in his headset carried the same slight accent, the same professional cadence that had marked her as one of the finest pilots he'd ever flown with. "Echo Actual, you're supposed to be dead," he transmitted, his words carrying more shock than military protocol typically allowed. "Death was greatly exaggerated," came the reply, followed by a pause that seemed to stretch across time itself. "I've been busy." Slowly, like a magician revealing a trick that defied comprehension, Echo's aircraft began materializing beside Rodriguez's Super Hornet. First, a shimmer in the starlight, then the outline of wings that swept back in configurations that belonged in science fiction, finally resolving into something that looked like it had been crafted by angels who understood physics better than earthbound engineers. Rodriguez had seen stealth aircraft before, had flown missions with B-2 bombers and F-22 Raptors, but this was something beyond stealth. This was invisibility made manifest, an aircraft that existed in the spaces between radar pulses and the blind spots of human imagination. Jesus Christ, Echo, what is that thing? The future, she replied simply. Question is whether you're ready to help build it or if you're going to report it and watch them bury it in bureaucracy for the next 20 years. Rodriguez stared at the impossible aircraft keeping perfect formation with his Super Hornet, its pilot presumably the same woman whose grave he'd visited just 6 months ago with flowers and memories of a pilot who'd saved his life over Aleppo. The mathematics of the situation didn't compute, but the evidence was undeniable. Esperanza Valdez-Chen was alive, flying technology that shouldn't exist, and asking him to make a choice that would define the rest of his military career. Below them, the lights of Virginia Beach twinkled like fallen stars, unaware that the future of aerial warfare was being negotiated at 30,000 feet by two pilots who'd once trusted each other with their lives and were about to do so again. The wind at altitude carried no sound, but Rodriguez could feel the weight of history pressing against his canopy. Echo's aircraft moved through the night sky with the fluid grace of a sea creature navigating deep ocean currents. Rodriguez struggled to process what his instruments were telling him. His radar painted empty air, where his eyes clearly saw an aircraft flying in perfect formation, its surfaces reflecting starlight in ways that hurt to contemplate. Echo, how long have you been dead? The question sounded absurd even as he asked it. 18 months, 7 days, approximately 14 hours, she replied with the precision that had made her legendary among the pilots who'd served with her in the 94th Fighter Squadron. Give or take the time I spent in a Syrian hospital having shrapnel removed from places I didn't know shrapnel could reach. Rodriguez remembered that mission. Echo had volunteered to provide close air support for an extraction operation that had gone sideways faster than anyone anticipated. She'd stayed on station long after her fuel should have forced her to return to base, engaging enemy positions with surgical precision, while A-10 Warthogs extracted Marines who would have died without her covering fire. Her aircraft had taken a surface-to-air missile hit. Rodriguez had seen the explosion, watched her FA-18 disappear into a fireball that painted the Syrian desert in shades of orange that haunted his dreams. The search and rescue teams had found wreckage scattered across 3 square miles and enough biological material to declare her killed in action. The missile missed my aircraft by 6 inches, Echo continued, her voice carrying the same matter-of-fact tone she'd used to describe weather conditions during pre-flight briefings. Hit the mountainside behind me, but the debris cloud knocked me unconscious, and when I came to, I was in a crater with an aircraft that looked like someone had put it through an industrial shredder. Rodriguez's hands tightened on his flight controls. Then how are you here, flying, whatever that is? The pause that followed stretched long enough for Rodriguez to wonder if his radio had failed. When Echo finally responded, her voice carried undertones that he'd never heard before, something that sounded like wonder mixed with carefully controlled fear. I was rescued by people who officially don't exist, flying aircraft that officially were never built, working on a project that officially was never funded. They told me I had 2 choices: stay dead and help them build the future of air superiority, or go back to flying Super Hornets until some bureaucrat decided I was too expensive to keep alive. The implications crashed over Rodriguez like a rogue wave. Echo hadn't just survived. She'd been recruited into something that operated beyond the reach of normal military channels, something that had given her access to technology that made current generation fighters look like museum pieces. Who are they? The question isn't who, Echo replied. "The question is whether you're ready to join them." Rodriguez's Super Hornet suddenly felt primitive, its twin engines straining to keep pace with an aircraft that seemed to mock the laws of physics with every movement. He was a career military pilot, trained to follow orders and trust the chain of command that had guided his life since he was 18 years old. But he was also a pilot who understood that some opportunities only came once, usually in the space between heartbeats when the future hung in the balance. "What do they want from me?" "Everything," Echo answered, "and in return they'll give you the sky." The classified briefing room at Naval Air Station Oceana felt smaller than Rodriguez remembered. Admiral Sarah Blackwood sat at the head of a conference table that had seen countless operational briefings, her silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun that couldn't quite contain the intensity radiating from her green eyes. She'd commanded carrier battle groups in the Persian Gulf, oversaw air operations during the liberation of Mosul, and had been personally decorated by 3 different presidents for actions that remained classified. But tonight, she looked like a woman confronting something that challenged her understanding of military reality. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, what you're about to hear exists outside normal operational security protocols," Admiral Blackwood began, her voice carrying the weight of decisions that could alter the balance of global power. "Project Skyfall has been operating under Special Access Program guidelines for 7 years. Total budget, classified. Personnel, classified. Objectives, classified. Results." She paused, glancing at a file folder that bore stamps indicating clearance levels Rodriguez didn't know existed. "Results have exceeded our most optimistic projections." Rodriguez sat at attention, still processing the surreal experience of landing his Super Hornet next to an aircraft that seemed to exist in violation of every engineering principle he understood. Echo had vanished again, literally vanished, after guiding him back to base with instructions to report to Admiral Blackwood immediately upon touchdown. "Ma'am, with respect, I thought Captain Valdez-Chen was killed in action over Syria." "Captain Valdez-Chen was killed in action," Admiral Blackwood confirmed. "Esperanza Valdez-Chen, however, survived. The woman you met tonight officially died when her aircraft was destroyed. What emerged from that crash site was something different." The Admiral activated a wall-mounted display that showed satellite imagery of a remote facility in Nevada, its structures barely visible against desert terrain that looked like the surface of Mars. "After Captain Valdez-Chen's recovery, she was brought here. Skunk Works Advanced Development. Think Lockheed's Skunk Works, but funded by compartmentalized budgets that don't appear on any official Pentagon documentation." Rodriguez studied the images, nodding security perimeters that seemed designed to keep secrets in rather than intruders out. "What do they do there?" "They solve problems that officially don't exist yet," Admiral Blackwood replied. "The aircraft you saw tonight represents 15 years of development, incorporating technologies that won't appear in mainstream military aviation for at least 2 decades. Adaptive camouflage that bends electromagnetic radiation around the airframe. Engines that produce thrust without traditional exhaust signatures. Avionics that interface directly with pilot neural activity." The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Neural interface. "Captain Valdez-Chen didn't just survive that crash, Lieutenant Commander. She volunteered for experimental procedures that made her the first human pilot capable of interfacing directly with 5th-generation adaptive aircraft systems. The woman you flew with tonight thinks at the speed of her aircraft's computers and flies with reaction times measured in microseconds rather than milliseconds." Rodriguez remembered the impossible maneuvers he'd witnessed, the way Echo's aircraft had moved like it was reading his intentions before he'd fully formed them. "What does this mean for operational security?" Admiral Blackwood's smile held no warmth. "It means, Lieutenant Commander, that you're about to become part of something that will redefine air superiority for the next 50 years. or you're going to sign documents that will ensure this conversation never happened. The choice hung in the air between them like unexploded ordnance. The Nevada facility sprawled across terrain that looked like God had forgotten to finish creating it. Rodriguez stepped off the transport aircraft onto a runway that stretched toward mountains that rose like broken teeth against a sky the color of burnished copper. Heat waves danced off the tarmac, creating mirages that seemed appropriate for a place where impossible things became reality. Echo waited beside a hangar that could have housed a small city, wearing a flight suit that looked regulation, until Rodriguez noticed the subtle differences. Fabric that seemed to shift color with the light, patches that displayed information in fonts he didn't recognize, and a helmet tucked under her arm that looked more like a piece of art than aviation equipment. "Welcome to nowhere," she said, extending a hand that felt surprisingly normal considering everything else about the situation defied normalcy. "Population, classified." Rodriguez shook her hand, nodding calluses that spoke of countless hours manipulating controls no conventional pilot had ever touched. "Echo, I have to ask, are you still human?" The question hung between them like a challenge to everything they thought they understood about the boundaries between flesh and technology. Echo considered it with the same analytical approach she'd always brought to complex tactical problems. "Define human," she replied finally. "If you mean do I still bleed when cut, yes. If you mean do I still think at biological speeds, no. If you mean do I still dream about flying, yes. If you mean do those dreams sometimes include aircraft that don't exist yet, also yes." She led him toward the hangar entrance, past security checkpoints that scanned them with technologies that felt more like gentle caresses than invasive searches. "The neural interface doesn't replace human intuition, Marcus. It amplifies it. I still make decisions the same way I always did. I just make them faster and with access to information that would overwhelm a conventional pilot." The hangar doors dilated rather than opened, revealing a space that contained aircraft that looked like they'd been designed by civilizations that understood physics better than earthbound engineers. Some configurations hurt to look at directly, their surfaces seeming to exist in more dimensions than Rodriguez's brain could process. "My God," he whispered. "No," Echo corrected gently. "Just very smart people with unlimited budgets and no bureaucratic oversight." She gestured toward an aircraft that seemed to be constructed from solidified lightning. "That's Angel 7. She can reach Mach 4.7 without afterburners and turn inside the engagement envelope of any missile currently in production." Rodriguez stared at aircraft that represented leaps in technology so dramatic they felt like magic. "How many people know about this?" 12, Echo replied. 13, counting you. The president gets briefed on sanitized versions of our capabilities, but even he doesn't know the full scope of what we've accomplished here." She paused beside an aircraft that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal frozen in the shape of wings. "This is Phantom 3. She's the aircraft I was flying when we met last night. She's also the aircraft that's going to show you what you're capable of becoming." Rodriguez felt reality sliding sideways as he realized Echo wasn't just showing him advanced technology. She was recruiting him into a transformation that would fundamentally alter what it meant to be a pilot. "What happens to Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez?" he asked. Echo's smile carried echoes of the woman he'd known before, mixed with something new that spoke of capabilities that transcended human limitations. "He evolves." The neural interface procedure felt less like surgery and more like an awakening that happened in stages, each one revealing capabilities Rodriguez hadn't known were possible. Dr. Catherine Reyes, the lead neurotechnologist whose credentials were so classified that even her name existed in files stamped with security levels Rodriguez was still learning about, explained the process with the calm precision of someone who'd performed miracles so many times they'd become routine. "We're not inserting hardware into your brain, Lieutenant Commander. Dr. Reyes explained as technicians positioned equipment that looked more like art installations than medical devices around the surgical chair. We're introducing biocompatible neural mesh that will integrate with your existing neural pathways. Think of it as adding bandwidth rather than changing the fundamental architecture. Rodriguez lay back in a chair that molded itself to his body with unsettling precision, watching displays that showed his brain activity in patterns of light that pulsed with his heartbeat. What will I be able to do? Initially, enhanced reaction times and improved spatial awareness, Dr. Reyes replied, making adjustments to equipment that hummed with barely contained energy. After integration completes, usually 6 to 8 weeks, direct interface with aircraft systems, predictive threat analysis, and tactical coordination capabilities that will make you effectively superhuman in air-to-air combat. Echo stood nearby, her own neural interface invisible beneath hair that had grown back to regulation length in the months since her procedure. The first time you engage full interface mode, it feels like someone turned on lights in rooms of your mind you didn't know existed, she said. Everything becomes clearer, faster, more connected. The procedure itself felt like falling asleep and waking up simultaneously, consciousness sliding between states that didn't quite qualify as either awake or unconscious. Rodriguez experienced flashes of sensory input that seemed to come from sources outside his own nervous system, glimpses of aircraft performance data, weather patterns, and electromagnetic signatures that painted pictures of the world in spectrums beyond normal human perception. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked subtly different. Colors seemed more vivid, edges sharper, and he could sense electronic devices in ways that felt like extending new senses he'd never known were missing. "How do you feel?" Dr. Reyes asked, monitoring readings on displays that showed his brain activity integrating with systems that had been dormant moments before. Rodriguez sat up slowly, testing movements that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, different, more connected. Echo smiled with recognition. That's the neural mesh establishing baseline connections. It'll get stronger over the next few weeks as your brain learns to utilize the new pathways. By the time you're cleared for flight operations, you'll be able to process information at roughly 3 times your previous cognitive speed. Rodriguez stood, noticing that his balance felt different, not impaired, but enhanced, as if someone had upgraded his inner ear to a more sophisticated model. "When do I fly?" "Tomorrow," Echo replied, starting with basic aircraft familiarization, then progressing through increasingly complex scenarios until you're ready for full combat integration. Rodriguez nodded, feeling anticipation mixed with something that might have been fear or excitement. It was becoming difficult to distinguish between emotions that had once felt distinctly different. "What's my call sign?" Echo considered the question with the same analytical approach she brought to tactical problems. "Ghost," she decided, "because after tomorrow, the pilot you used to be will exist only as a memory." The first flight changed everything Rodriguez thought he understood about the relationship between pilot and aircraft. Strapped into the cockpit of Angel 7, surrounded by controls that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch, he felt the neural interface coming online like sunrise after a lifetime of darkness. The aircraft systems flowed into his consciousness like water finding its level, giving him awareness of engine parameters, aerodynamic forces, and environmental conditions in ways that transcended traditional instrument readings. He didn't read airspeed from a display. He felt it as pressure against his consciousness. He didn't monitor fuel levels. He sensed them as reserves of potential energy that existed as extensions of his own body. "Ghost Actual, how's the interface integration?" Echo's voice came through communication systems that felt more like telepathy than radio transmission. "Incredible," Rodriguez replied, testing control inputs that translated his intentions into aircraft movements with precision that seemed impossible. I can feel every component, every system. It's like the aircraft is part of me. That's exactly what it is, Echo confirmed, her own aircraft maintaining formation beside his in patterns that demonstrated capabilities that conventional fighters couldn't approach. The neural interface doesn't just let you fly the aircraft, it makes you and the aircraft a single integrated system. Rodriguez executed a turn that would have been impossible in his Super Hornet, pulling G-forces that should have rendered him unconscious, but felt like gentle pressure against the edges of his enhanced awareness. The aircraft responded to micro-adjustments in his thinking, anticipating his intentions and optimizing performance parameters before he'd consciously decided on specific maneuvers. "Echo, this is beyond anything I imagined," he transmitted, climbing through altitude levels at rates that defied his previous understanding of aircraft performance. "How fast can we go?" Angel 7's top speed is classified, but her cruising velocity at optimal altitude approaches Mach 5.2, Echo replied. More importantly, she can sustain those speeds while maintaining maneuverability that makes conventional fighters look like they're flying through molasses. Rodriguez engaged afterburners that operated on principles he didn't fully understand, feeling acceleration that pressed him back into a seat that adjusted automatically to support his enhanced physiology. The world below became a blur of terrain features that his upgraded visual processing systems cataloged with superhuman precision. "Ghost Actual, you're cleared for engagement scenario Alpha 7, came a transmission from ground control. Multiple bogies at various altitudes, standard air-to-air combat parameters. Rodriguez checked weapon systems that responded to his neural commands with responsiveness that made traditional trigger pulls seem primitive. Copy, control, engaging targets. What followed was less like air combat and more like a demonstration of capabilities that redefined what individual pilots could accomplish. Rodriguez engaged 12 simulated enemy aircraft in scenarios that would have challenged an entire squadron of conventional fighters. His enhanced reaction times and predictive capabilities allowing him to anticipate and counter threats before they fully developed. When the exercise concluded, Rodriguez felt like a musician who just played a symphony on an instrument capable of sounds he'd never heard before. "Welcome to the future of air superiority," Echo transmitted. "How does it feel to own the sky?" Rodriguez smiled inside his helmet, understanding for the first time that he'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Like coming home. The mission briefing revealed the true scope of what Project Skyfall had been preparing for. Admiral Blackwood stood before a holographic display that showed global threat assessments in real time, with enemy capabilities highlighted in patterns that painted a disturbing picture of international tensions approaching critical thresholds. "Gentlemen and ladies," Admiral Blackwood began, addressing the 12 pilots who comprised the entirety of humanity's most advanced air combat capability. "What I'm about to share with you represents intelligence gathered from sources that officially don't exist, regarding threats that officially haven't been identified, to counter capabilities that officially haven't been developed." The display shifted to show satellite imagery of aircraft installations in regions Rodriguez recognized as strategically significant: Iran, North Korea, and Western China. But these weren't conventional military airfields. The aircraft visible in the images defied easy classification, their configurations suggesting technologies that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical research. "Our intelligence indicates that several hostile nations have been developing advanced aircraft capabilities that represent significant threats to current NATO air superiority," Admiral Blackwood continued. "These aircraft incorporate stealth technologies that make our F-22 Raptors look like World War II fighters on radar screens, plus performance capabilities that exceed anything in our conventional inventory." Echo studied the intelligence images with analytical intensity that Rodriguez had learned to recognize as her neural interface processing information at superhuman speeds. "Ma'am, are we looking at reverse-engineered technology?" "Unknown," Admiral Blackwood replied. "What we do know is that these capabilities represent paradigm shifts in air combat that require responses beyond conventional military doctrine, which brings us to Operation Skyfall." The display changed to show mission parameters that made Rodriguez's enhanced nervous system spike with anticipation mixed with carefully controlled fear. Intelligence suggests that hostile forces are planning coordinated strikes against key NATO installations within the next 60 days. Traditional air defense systems would be ineffective against the technologies we're facing. Rodriguez felt his enhanced awareness processing tactical implications at speeds that would have overwhelmed his pre-procedure consciousness. "Ma'am, what are our rules of engagement?" Admiral Blackwood's expression hardened in ways that spoke of decisions that would haunt her regardless of their outcomes. "Rules of engagement are simple, ghost actual. Prevent enemy aircraft from reaching their targets by any means necessary. The technologies you've been equipped with represent our only viable defense against capabilities that could fundamentally alter global strategic balance." She paused, letting the implications settle among pilots who understood that they were being asked to shoulder responsibilities that transcended traditional military missions. "Each of you represents approximately $2 billion in research and development, plus capabilities that took 7 years to develop. You are not expendable resources. You are irreplaceable assets defending interests that extend far beyond normal operational parameters." Echo raised her hand with the precision of a pilot requesting permission to speak. "Admiral, are we operating under standard military protocols?" "Negative," Admiral Blackwood replied. "You are operating under Special Access Program protocols that supersede conventional military authority. You report directly to this command. You operate outside normal airspace restrictions, and you are authorized to engage any aircraft that presents threats to strategic installations regardless of national origin or diplomatic considerations." Rodriguez felt the weight of that authorization settling across his shoulders like a mantle that carried responsibilities he'd never been trained for. They weren't just pilots anymore. They were guardians of technological superiority that could determine the future of human conflict. "When do we deploy?" he asked. 48 hours, Admiral Blackwood replied. "Location classified until departure. Mission duration classified. Probability of return." She paused. "Classified." The pre-flight briefing took place in a facility that existed in no official records, buried beneath Nevada desert at depths that placed it beyond the reach of conventional surveillance. Rodriguez and Echo stood before displays that showed real-time intelligence updates from around the globe, watching threat assessments that painted increasingly urgent pictures of international tensions approaching points of no return. Intelligence confirms that hostile forces have begun moving advanced aircraft to forward staging areas. Colonel James Mitchell briefed them, his weathered face bearing scars that spoke of conflicts that had never appeared in public records. Satellite imagery shows at least 36 aircraft that match configurations we've been tracking, positioned at bases within striking distance of strategic NATO installations. Rodriguez studied the intelligence data flowing across displays that interfaced directly with his neural enhancement, processing information at speeds that allowed him to analyze patterns that would have taken conventional intelligence analysts days to identify. The enemy aircraft showed design philosophies that seemed to prioritize capabilities that directly countered traditional air defense systems. "Sir, what's our tactical approach?" Echo asked, her own neural interface clearly analyzing the same data streams with processing power that transcended human limitations. "Intercept and eliminate," Colonel Mitchell replied with the directness of a career soldier who'd learned to communicate essential information without diplomatic language. These aircraft represent existential threats to installations that maintain strategic balance between NATO and hostile forces. If they reach their targets, the results could trigger conflicts that make previous wars look like minor diplomatic disagreements. Rodriguez felt his enhanced nervous system processing the implications at speeds that generated tactical scenarios faster than his pre-procedure consciousness could have followed. Colonel, are we looking at the opening moves of a larger conflict? Unknown, Mitchell replied. What we do know is that preventing these strikes represents our best opportunity to maintain strategic stability without escalating to scenarios that no one wants to contemplate. Echo examined satellite imagery that showed aircraft configurations unlike anything in public aviation databases. Sir, these designs suggest technologies that shouldn't be available to hostile forces. Are we looking at indigenous development or technology transfer from sources we haven't identified? Colonel Mitchell's expression suggested he was accessing classified information that carried security levels beyond standard operational briefings. Intelligence indicates possible collaboration between hostile nations and entities that operate outside conventional diplomatic frameworks. The technologies we're seeing represent capabilities that may have originated from sources that officially don't exist. Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground facility's climate control. Are we talking about technology transfer from our own programs? That possibility hasn't been ruled out, Mitchell confirmed, which makes this mission even more critical. We're potentially facing capabilities that originated from the same research programs that created your enhancements, deployed by forces that understand our operational doctrines and tactical approaches. The implications crashed over Rodriguez like a rogue wave. They weren't just facing advanced enemy aircraft. They were potentially facing mirror images of their own capabilities, piloted by adversaries who understood their strengths and weaknesses with intimate precision. When do we launch? Echo asked. Colonel Mitchell checked displays that showed countdown timers synchronized with intelligence updates from around the globe. 6 hours. Target area, classified until airborne. Mission parameters, total air superiority at any cost. Rodriguez nodded, feeling the weight of responsibilities that extended far beyond anything he trained for, settling across shoulders that had been enhanced to bear burdens that transcended human limitations. Understood, sir. We'll be ready. The launch facility revealed itself as Rodriguez and Echo approached their aircraft, massive doors dilating to reveal a runway that stretched toward horizons that seemed to exist beyond normal geographical limitations. Their aircraft, Angel 7 and Phantom 3, weighted like predators crafted from materials that bent light around their surfaces, creating optical effects that hurt to examine directly. Rodriguez sealed his helmet, feeling the neural interface coming online with sensations that had become familiar over weeks of integration training, but still carried elements that felt like glimpses of evolution in progress. His enhanced awareness expanded to encompass aircraft systems, environmental conditions, and threat assessments that painted detailed pictures of the operational environment they were entering. Ghost Actual, Phantom 3, you are cleared for immediate departure, came the transmission from control towers that existed in facilities buried so deep that even their exact locations remained classified. Your route will take you over international waters to engagement zones that are designated as free-fire areas under Special Access Program protocols. Rodriguez felt Angel 7 responding to his neural commands as he taxied toward a runway that seemed to stretch toward vanishing points that existed beyond normal physical space. The aircraft's systems integrated with his consciousness in ways that made the boundary between pilot and machine increasingly theoretical. Phantom 3, how's your integration? He transmitted to Echo, whose aircraft maintained perfect formation beside his own despite executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for conventional fighters. Full synchronization achieved, Echo replied, her voice carrying undertones that suggested she was accessing information streams beyond normal human perception. Ghost Actual, I'm receiving real-time intelligence updates directly through the neural interface. Hostile aircraft have begun moving toward their targets. Rodriguez felt his enhanced awareness processing tactical scenarios at speeds that generated battle plans faster than conventional military planning could accomplish. How many are we facing? Initial count suggests 36 aircraft, but intelligence indicates that number may be conservative, Echo replied. We're potentially looking at the largest air engagement since World War II, except we're the entire friendly force. The implications should have been terrifying, but Rodriguez's enhanced nervous system processed the situation with calm analytical precision that transcended fear or doubt. Two pilots against potentially 40 or more advanced enemy aircraft would have been suicide for conventional forces. For pilots equipped with neural interfaces and aircraft that redefine performance parameters, it represented a tactical challenge that pushed their capabilities to theoretical limits. Phantom 3, are you ready to rewrite the rules of air combat? Rodriguez asked as they approached takeoff speed on a runway that seemed to extend beyond the horizon. Ghost Actual, I was born ready, Echo replied, her aircraft lifting off with grace that made gravity seem like a suggestion rather than a law of physics. Let's show them what evolution looks like. Rodriguez followed her into air that felt different, charged with possibilities that extended beyond normal atmospheric composition, carrying them toward a confrontation that would determine whether humanity's most advanced pilots could defend strategic installations against technologies that challenged everything they thought they understood about aerial warfare. Below them, the Nevada desert fell away like a discarded map, leaving them climbing toward altitudes where the future of international relations would be decided by capabilities that officially didn't exist, piloted by individuals who had transcended the limitations of conventional human performance. The engagement zone materialized on their displays as they approached international waters, tactical information flowing directly into their enhanced consciousness through neural interfaces that processed intelligence at speeds that redefined situational awareness. Rodriguez felt Angel 7 responding to threats that hadn't yet become visible, her systems analyzing electromagnetic signature and flight patterns with predictive capabilities that bordered on precognition. Ghost Actual, I'm reading multiple bogies at bearing 090, angels 20 through 35, Echo transmitted, her voice carrying the controlled intensity of a pilot whose enhanced awareness was processing more information than conventional human consciousness could handle. Configuration analysis suggests we're looking at aircraft that incorporate stealth technologies beyond current NATO capabilities. Rodriguez's neural interface painted detailed pictures of the approaching threats directly into his consciousness. 38 aircraft arranged in formations that demonstrated tactical sophistication, that made his enhanced nervous system spike with anticipation, mixed with carefully controlled apprehension. The enemy aircraft showed design philosophies that prioritized capabilities specifically engineered to counter traditional air defense systems. Phantom 3, Tactical Assessment, Rodriguez requested, climbing toward engagement altitude while his aircraft systems prepared weapons that operated on principles he didn't fully understand but trusted with absolute confidence. Hostile aircraft appear to be operating coordinated intercept patterns designed to overwhelm conventional air defense through simultaneous multi-vector attacks, Echo replied, her neural interface clearly analyzing enemy formations with processing power that transcended human limitations. But they're not accounting for our capabilities. Rodriguez smiled grimly inside his helmet, understanding that the enemy's tactical calculations had been based on assumptions about human performance that no longer applied to pilots equipped with neural enhancements and aircraft that redefined the boundaries of possibility. Ghost Actual, Phantom 3, "You are cleared to engage all hostile targets," came the transmission from command authority that existed beyond normal military channels. Rules of engagement: prevent enemy aircraft from reaching designated targets by any means necessary. Rodriguez felt his enhanced consciousness expanding to encompass tactical scenarios that processed faster than thought, generating battle plans that optimized their two-aircraft capability against enemy forces that outnumbered them nearly 20-1. But numbers meant less when each of their aircraft represented capabilities that exceeded entire squadrons of conventional fighters. Phantom 3, suggest we execute Alpha 7 engagement pattern, Rodriguez transmitted, referencing tactical doctrines that had been developed specifically for scenarios where enhanced pilots faced overwhelming conventional forces. Concur, Ghost Actual, Echo replied, initiating full combat enhancement mode. Rodriguez felt his neural interface shifting into configurations that he'd only experienced during training exercises, his enhanced awareness expanding to process information streams that painted complete pictures of the battlespace in resolutions that hurt to contemplate. Time seemed to slow as his consciousness accelerated beyond human speeds, each second stretching to contain tactical analysis that would have taken conventional pilots minutes to accomplish. The first enemy aircraft appeared on his enhanced vision like predators emerging from digital camouflage, their stealth capabilities sophisticated enough to challenge conventional radar, but inadequate against sensors that operated beyond normal electromagnetic spectrums. Engaging, Rodriguez announced, feeling Angel 7 responding to his neural commands with precision that made conventional trigger pulls seem primitive. The battle for air supremacy had begun. The first missile exchange redefined Rodriguez's understanding of air combat. Enemy weapons streaked toward them with velocities that pushed the boundaries of physics, their guidance systems demonstrating sophistication that suggested development programs comparable to the most advanced NATO capabilities. But Rodriguez's enhanced reaction times, processing information at speeds measured in microseconds rather than milliseconds, allowed him to perceive incoming threats as manageable tactical problems rather than unavoidable death sentences. Ghost Actual, Splash 1, Echo announced as her weapons found their first target, an enemy aircraft that disintegrated in a fireball that painted the sky in shades of orange that resembled sunrise over a battlefield. Hostile count now 37. Rodriguez engaged 3 enemy aircraft simultaneously, his neural interface coordinating weapon systems with precision that allowed him to track multiple targets while executing evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible for conventional pilots. Angel 7 responded to his enhanced consciousness like an extension of his own nervous system, pulling G-forces that should have rendered him unconscious, but felt like gentle pressure against the edges of his amplified awareness. Phantom 3, recommend we separate and execute pincer movement Alpha 9. Rodriguez transmitted while engaging afterburners that accelerated him beyond Mach 4 in pursuit of enemy aircraft that were demonstrating capabilities